March 23rd, 2026. The Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy positioned 3 Type 055 destroyers in a line across the narrowest point of the Strait of Malacca, not conducting exercises, not on patrol, blocking. The strait is 1.5 miles wide at its narrowest point between Singapore and Indonesia. 3 warships, spaced 800 meters apart, created a physical barrier that no commercial vessel could pass without Chinese permission. Within 6 hours, 47 oil tankers were stopped. By the end of the first day, 93 vessels carrying crude oil, liquefied natural gas, and refined petroleum products sat motionless in the water, waiting for clearance that Beijing was not granting. Here's what that actually means. 80% of the oil that reaches Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and the Philippines transits through the Strait of Malacca. 15 million barrels per day. China just turned off the tap, not by firing a shot, by parking 3 ships in a waterway that international law says should remain open. The Strait of Malacca is 550 miles long, but only one section matters. The narrowest crossing between Singapore's coast and Indonesia's Sumatra island. 1.5 miles of water that separates 2 land masses. At that width, 3 warships positioned correctly can monitor and control every vessel attempting passage. The Chinese destroyers didn't anchor. They're maintaining station keeping using dynamic positioning systems. Engines running, radar active, weapon systems online. Each Type 055 destroyer carries 112 vertical launch cells loaded with a mix of surface-to-air missiles, anti-ship missiles, and land attack cruise missiles. The YJ-18 anti-ship missile has a range of 540 kilometers. From their position in the strait, those destroyers can engage targets across the entire Malacca approach, the Singapore Strait, and deep into the Andaman Sea. Any vessel that attempts to run the blockade without clearance enters a weapons engagement zone with 0 room for evasion. Let's talk about what happens when Asia's oil supply stops moving for 48 hours. Japan imports 99% of its crude oil. 87% of those imports transit the Strait of Malacca. Japan's strategic petroleum reserve holds approximately 90 days of supply at normal consumption rates. But normal consumption assumes the economy is functioning. When oil tankers stop arriving, Japan's refineries don't immediately shut down. They continue processing existing inventory. But shipping companies see the blockade and stop dispatching new tankers toward Asia. Insurance rates for vessels in the region spike. Tankers already en route divert to alternate destinations. Within 1 week, spot prices for crude oil in Asian markets increase 40% as buyers panic and bid up the limited supply still available. Within 2 weeks, Japanese refineries begin reducing output as feedstock inventories deplete. Gasoline prices double. Diesel becomes scarce. Industries dependent on just-in-time delivery chains start experiencing shortages. South Korea's situation is worse. 94% of South Korea's energy comes from imports. The country has a 60-day strategic reserve, but like Japan, that reserve assumes normal economic activity. South Korea's manufacturing sector depends on continuous power generation. Samsung's semiconductor fabs, Hyundai's auto plants, the shipyards, the chemical refineries, all of it runs on imported energy. When the oil stops flowing, electricity generation starts drawing down reserves. Spot power prices spike. Industries with lower priority access start experiencing rolling blackouts. The government begins rationing diesel fuel for commercial transport. Within 30 days, if the blockade holds, South Korea faces a choice between maintaining electricity for residential areas or keeping industrial production online. Both is not possible. Taiwan imports 98% of its energy. The island has a 146-day strategic petroleum reserve, the largest in Asia relative to consumption. But Taiwan's reserve was built specifically for this scenario, a blockade that cuts off energy imports. Taiwan can survive longer than Japan or South Korea on existing reserves, but survival means economic contraction. The semiconductor industry that produces 60% of the world's chips requires stable power, ultra-pure water, and precision climate control. When energy supplies become uncertain, TSMC cannot maintain the production schedules that Apple, Nvidia, and AMD depend on. Global chip shortages that crippled auto production in 2021 were caused by demand spikes and factory shutdowns. This scenario involves the deliberate choking of supply from the world's most critical chip producer. The economic damage extends far beyond Taiwan. China is not blocking its own energy supplies. Chinese oil imports do transit the Strait of Malacca. Approximately 80% of China's crude imports pass through the strait. But China began construction on the China-Myanmar oil pipeline in 2010, specifically to create an alternative route that bypasses Malacca. The pipeline runs from Myanmar's coast on the Bay of Bengal to Kunming in China's Yunnan province. Capacity is 22 million tons per year, roughly 440,000 barrels per day. That's not enough to replace Malacca entirely, but it's enough to ensure China maintains minimum energy security while other Asian economies collapse. China also maintains a strategic petroleum reserve estimated at 550 million barrels, significantly larger than the official figure Beijing reports. At reduced consumption rates during a regional crisis, China can operate for 6 to 9 months without imports. The blockade is not about Chinese energy security, it's about Chinese leverage over economies that have no alternative supply routes. Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan cannot build pipelines to alternate suppliers. Geography doesn't allow it. They're islands or peninsulas surrounded by water. The only route for bulk energy imports is by sea, and every major sea route to those countries passes through choke points that China can control or threaten. The Strait of Malacca is the most critical. The Lammak Strait and Sunda Strait are alternatives, but they add 3 to 7 days to voyage times and increase shipping costs significantly. More importantly, those straits are also within range of Chinese naval and air assets now operating from bases in the South China Sea. The United States Navy operates in the region. The 7th Fleet is headquartered in Japan. At any given time, 50 to 60 U.S. warships are assigned to the Indo-Pacific. That sounds like overwhelming force until you look at what those ships are actually doing. Carrier strike groups cycle through maintenance, training, and deployment. On average, one carrier is operationally available in the Western Pacific at any time. Destroyers and cruisers are dispersed across thousands of miles of ocean. The idea that the U.S. Navy can immediately challenge a Chinese blockade of the Malacca Strait assumes those forces can concentrate quickly and operate in an environment where China has geographic advantage. China's blockade position is 1,200 miles from U.S. naval bases in Japan. It's 200 miles from Chinese air bases on Hainan Island. Chinese J-20 stealth fighters can reach the strait in under 30 minutes. Chinese H-6N bombers carrying YJ-12 anti-ship missiles can strike targets in the strait from bases in southern China without leaving Chinese airspace. The DF-21D anti-ship ballistic missile, the system designed specifically to target aircraft carriers, has a range of 1,500 kilometers. A carrier operating near the Malacca Strait to challenge the blockade is well within that engagement envelope. U.S. naval commanders know this. The question they're asking is not can we break the blockade? The question is, can we break the blockade without losing a carrier? No American carrier has been sunk in combat since World War II. The loss of a carrier would not just be a tactical defeat, it would be a strategic collapse of U.S. credibility in the Pacific. Every ally that depends on American security guarantees would see that loss and recalculate their relationship with Washington. Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Australia, all of them would face the same question. If the United States cannot protect a carrier, can it protect us? Beijing understands this calculation. The blockade is designed to force Washington into a choice where both options are defeats. Challenge the blockade and risk losing a carrier, or accept the blockade and demonstrate that American power cannot guarantee freedom of navigation in the world's most critical waterway. The economic pressure builds exponentially. Week 1, oil prices spike, shipping insurance increases, industries begin contingency planning. Week 2, refineries reduce output, fuel prices double, rationing begins. Week 3, electricity generation starts drawing strategic reserves, industries face rolling blackouts, supply chains break. Week 4, if the blockade holds, Japan and South Korea face economic contraction rates not seen since the 1930s. Manufacturing shuts down, unemployment spikes, governments face civil unrest as populations realize their energy-dependent lifestyle is unsustainable when someone else controls the supply. China has not issued formal demands. Beijing's official statements call the naval deployment a routine exercise in international waters. That deniability is strategic. If China announced this was a blockade in response to specific policy disputes, it would trigger immediate international condemnation and potential military response. By maintaining the fiction that this is an exercise, China allows other countries to save face while complying. Japan can quietly signal it will moderate positions on Taiwan without publicly admitting it bent to Chinese pressure. South Korea can delay military cooperation agreements with the United States without framing it as capitulation. The countries affected can adjust their policies in ways that serve Chinese interests while pretending they made independent decisions. The Strait of Malacca blockade is not a military operation designed to sink ships or seize territory. It's a coercion operation designed to demonstrate that China controls access to resources that Asian economies cannot survive without. The lesson is simple. Your prosperity depends on supply chains we can cut whenever we choose. Your strategic reserves buy you weeks, not months. Your alliances with distant powers cannot protect you from geographic reality. We are here. We control the waterways, adjust your policies accordingly, or watch your economies collapse in real time. Share this, because the mainstream coverage is calling this a naval exercise. They're showing you ships on patrol. They're not showing you the 93 tankers stopped in the water. They're not explaining that Japan has 60 days before refineries start shutting down. They're not connecting the blockade to the leverage it creates. Both the exercise narrative and the blockade reality are true. Only one explains what happens next. The ships are still there, the tankers are still waiting. And every day this continues, Asia's energy security becomes more dependent on Chinese decisions. The Strait of Malacca is 1.5 miles wide. 3 warships are blocking 15 million barrels per day, and no one is stopping them.